Salam, everybody. Good morning, good morning. Welcome in our daily message from the Qur'an. And then we are getting into the absolute climax and rise of King Solomon, as well as his downfall. I know it came very soon and very abruptly. I was not expecting that at all. But let's go ahead and learn about that in a few minutes. Before we do, let's start out with our daily message. Checking in on the people. Alright, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Alright. Okay. Only close by. Alright, so interesting. I have my thumb on the very, very beginning of Surah 30, which is Ar-Rum, which means the Romans. So it's just the introduction to this surah here. Let's go ahead and just write this down. We'll go ahead and read lines 1 through 3. Surah 30, the Romans. 1, 2, 3. And as always, every surah, I don't know if you guys remember this, begins with the 3 words, right? Alif Lim Mim. Alif Lim Mim. It says the Roman Empire has been defeated, and a land close by, but they, even after this defeat of theirs, will soon be victorious. Alright, so this is starting out with the decline, and then I guess the soon victory of the Roman Empire. Very, very interesting. And it's funny how the Quran was written after the Bible. It follows the Bible pretty closely, it leaves out little parts here and there, but it does follow the structure and the timeline of the Bible. It includes a lot of stories that we're familiar with, like Abraham, Moses, and then it also includes some things that we might not be familiar with. But the Roman Empire is definitely in the Bible, right? Especially during the Gospel and that era, right? When the Romans were taking over Jerusalem, they had power, they had residence in Jerusalem, collecting taxes, all that. Did. Really the rise and fall, or the fall and rise, is what this is describing here, of the Roman Empire. All right. I'm just trying to gain a little bit of understanding here. So, although this surah is called the Romans, it doesn't really go into much detail about who the Romans were, what they did. It doesn't really go into any detail at all. What this describes is really the grace and the glory of Allah. So it doesn't matter, right, who the people are. We often think about the Old Testament and we think about the Lord picking sides, right? He has his assigned people, the people that he looks after, and nobody else is important or nobody else matters. That's sometimes the perspective, and then the perspective that a lot of people who took the faith and abused it seem to take. Like, oh, this is God's chosen people, right? But really, God is the chosen God, right? He's, well, not chosen God, but God chooses all of the earth everything that exists in it, that is his. That is his dominion. That is his chosen people. Everybody who exists in the earth, whether that be the Israelites, whether that be the Romans, whether that be the Canaanites, right? We'll talk a little bit more about the Canaanites because we discover, right, later in this First Kings, we discover the Moabites, we discover the Hivites, we discover the Perizzites. All of these stem from the line of Canaan. And they were problematic because they did not look to God, right? They had those false gods or those idols. They had Shubash, they had Melech. They had all of these false gods and idols, but that does not mean God neglected them or punished them, right? The neglect and the punishment came from the Israelites around them, right? The Israelites took those people, the Canaanites, into slavery, right? They punished them with their own hand. Same here for the Romans, right? They had their time of success. They had their time of domination, really. Domination, control, power, wealth. They had a great, great empire. And they didn't even look to the God that we might have looked to. I was watching a movie and it says, no, we do not worship your God. We have other gods, right? We look to the Roman gods. I forget whom and what and where those gods were. But even though they look to other gods, did God forget them? Does God neglect them? Does God not care about the outcome of their being, of their journey? No, not at all. So I guess what this is saying is you do not need to be a part of a specific group. You do not need to have a claim to any one specific arena. God will always be there looking out after you. Of course, there are consequences, right, for doing an outright sin in the eyes of the Lord, especially when you know better. More importantly, when you know better. And so we'll learn about that today in 1 Kings, where Solomon knows better. He has this relationship established with the Lord. His father was extremely faithful to the Lord, King David. Very, very faithful to the Lord. Yet his eyes began to turn away from the Lord, and we'll discover why that is. Even then, right, God still looks after him. Yes, there are consequences to sin, right? I talked about it's not always the action in itself, it's the things that follow, right? And sometimes God will purposely delay the consequences to not even take effect, maybe in King Solomon's life, or the one who sinned. It might not even take place in their life. It might follow generations to come. So that is what we'll be learning about today. But yes, just know, everybody might think, oh, I don't believe in God, but I believe in, the universe, or spiritual. I'm very spiritual. God is still looking out after you, and he's waiting for you to turn to him when the time comes. But he says, let there be no rush to it, right? You will come when you're ready. I am patient. We are waiting, right? So everything in good time. Give me one moment. Let me just answer the door real quick. Hi, sorry about that. As I was wrapping this up, I thought of a title midway through, so as I'm thinking of the title, I should have just written it down. Let's see. Oh, it was a good one too, you guys. Give me one moment. We talked about this. I think this is kind of the common theme too we've been discussing over the last few weeks, is everything in the earth belongs to the Lord. Doesn't matter if you're faithful or unfaithful, religious or not religious, right? You still belong to the Lord. And that's really the main point. And we'll be learning about, not to say learning about, but we'll be discovering the other gods, right, that exist, the other entities that exist. And it's not to say that they don't exist, right? It's not to say that they don't exist. It's not to say that the other entities are inherently evil, right? These entities that people look towards, because there are very real powers in the world. It's like dealing with energy of sorts. But the Lord is in control. God is in control of everything, right? He allows, He does not allow. He permisses, He does not permit. So, yes, permisses. Is that a word? Permiss? Permiss. I don't think I used that right. Premise. No, permits. He permits, He does not permit. That's what I was going for. Okay. Alright, alright, alright. I'm just going to do a nice long wordy title like I normally do. It's kind of going with what we're talking about here. Yesterday too, in our introduction, we talked about the distractions, right? So that was actually really great timing, and it will be foreshadowing what we'll talk about today, how Solomon really just gets distracted. He gets ultimately distracted between his wealth and his wives, which we will soon discuss. He gets very distracted, right? And he strays further and further away. And he has all these great things we talked about. That's the most challenging thing and the hardest thing to do, is when you have all the wealth, when you have all the blessing, when you have all this success, will you remain faithful and still attribute that to the Lord? And this is here what the Romans do, right? They forget, right? Or maybe they never knew. Or maybe they wanted to establish their own God or gods, right? Which they did, they had, right? They did. They kind of forgot. They got distracted of the fact that there's somebody there who keeps showing up, keeps communicating, keeps revealing himself. And that's why this God, our God, is so important, because He shows up, He communicates, He's there for us, whether we see it or not, right? Some people have the shield over their eyes and the plugs in their ears, right? They might not be able to witness, but soon, right, with patience, when you're ready, when you're prepared, when we're doing all the things that we talk about, he'll be there, He'll come. And sometimes when you don't do any of that, and you're unprepared, and you're not expecting, sometimes that's the most beautiful way. Alright. All the powers under the Lord's dominion. Nice wordy title. I had something good earlier, but we'll leave it at that, you guys. Thank you for listening. Let me go ahead and get into 1 Kings. I will be back. Bye-bye.